I'm Isabelle, your wine tasting coach, and I have prepared a presentation that I will take you through about what makes Cabernet Sauvignon special. So that was part one, looking at the sensory architecture of the grape variety, looking at the varietal blueprint. We talk about the aromas and then the structure, especially around the tannins. So that was a bit technical, but sometimes we have to, I think it's interesting to know where it's coming from and maybe try to precise and define some terms that are a bit vague or sometimes misused. So let's move on to part two, which is about the terroir, the winemaking, and the label. So I'll try to summarize on these tables the influence of the climate and how the climate influence the expression of these core variety components, the black fruits, the greenness, and the tannins. So in cool climates like Bordeaux and Coonawarra, the wines tend to be more acid. The expression of the fruit is medium. There is a tendency to have this green note more than in any other climate, and the alcohol is lower compared, for example, to Napa, a warmer climate. In a warmer climate, the acidity is medium. The fruits are more expressed. The greenness tend to be suppressed because of this beta-damascenon effect that suppress the greenness and help amplify the fruit flavor. And the alcohol is higher because more sugar, more alcohol. And in other hot climates, and this refers to Chile, for example, you have the altitude, you have the heat as well, where the wine can be jammy, more prune, and a lot of alcohol as well. So Bordeaux, high in tannins, more pronounced acidity, blackcurrant, graphite, tobacco, and cedar type of aromas. In contrast, Napa, which has high alcohol, more refined tannins. They use either American or French oak to deliver these vanilla or coconut aromas. And because of the conditions, the wine tends to be more purple, also had some blackberry fruit. In Australia, Coonawarra is cooler compared to Margaret River, but it has also an interesting terroir with a lot of red soil, and it confers firm tannins, interesting flavors, and there are lots of eucalyptus in that area. So sometimes you can sense some eucalyptus, which is due to this compound, the 1,8-cineol. Margaret River tend to be a bit warmer, so it's more ripe cassis with some green notes and some good tannins. And in the Andes, you have those ripe plum and sometimes high greenness. So it's kind of a contrasting. In terms of the other winemaking tools, we mentioned the oak species. In France, tend to only use French oak, but I'm sure they are looking at other species. So French oak will deliver those vanilla characters, cedar, baking spice, and help with smoothing the polymerized tannins. Whereas the American oak tend to deliver more lactone content, which in part like coconut, dill, and sweet vanilla. And had this experience recently where the wine was just like dill, only dill. And it was just the first time I ever noted such a dominant dill aroma in a wine. That was even overwhelming. So I'm not sure what was the oak management, but certainly it was American oak. We talked briefly on the malolactic fermentation. So if you're not familiar with this secondary fermentation that winemakers choose to adopt or to implement is when the juice is high in acid, in malic acid especially, they will use lactic bacteria to transform this acid into another acid, the lactic acid, which is smoother. The conversion also affect the mouthfeel, so not only the taste, So the sharpness of the acidity is reduced, but it creates also this creamy mouthfeel and this buttery, nutty aroma. It can be desirable or it can be overwhelming depending on the management of the malolactic fermentation. But what I've read as well is that winemakers tend to manage the dominance of the buttery note, the diacetyl compound, by adding sulfur during the fermentation. So the SO2s bind with the diacetyl compound, so it reduces the impact of diacetyl. So you don't have really buttery Cabernet like you would have buttery Chardonnay. They really manage so that it's not overwhelming. All right, so what about the label? So it's very rare to have a 100% Cabernet Sauvignon in the bottle, even if on the label it says Cabernet Sauvignon. So in the US and other countries, the percentage of Cabernet Sauvignon with overblended variety is different. So 75% is usually the rule, and the 25% the winemakers place depending on how they want to modify or act upon the flavor profile. So we have the classic Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, and Petit Verdot, which will deliver additional sensory characteristics. So Merlot is smoother, provide additional aromatics. Cabernet Franc provide more floral notes. Malbec provide the structure as well and deeper color, maybe some cocoa character. And Petit Verdot is really about the color as well, and the structure. So that's kind of the secret weapon of the winemaker. They don't always give you the exact blend, and the blend, may change. For a Cabernet that you buy every year from the same vintner, the blend, might change from year to year depending on the condition of the harvest, the wine, and how the winemaker want to express, and what is the style that they want to create. So I summarize on this table the different regions. So of course, Bordeaux, they have their own rules, which means that there is no rule. It depends on the appellation and how it is controlled. But the rest of France and most of European countries, it's 85% Cabernet Sauvignon and up to 15% of other varieties. We mentioned USA on the federal level, while Oregon is in the US. Australia is 85%, Chile 75%. So it's not always 100 Cabernet Sauvignon. That's why, depending on the assemblage, the blended variety, the profile can also be very different. So here's your full picture of the sensory map. We added, the typical aromas, taste, and mouthfeel linked to the climate, linked to the winemaking influences. We haven't talked much about aging. The type of aromas that evolve with age is not always, varietal specific, variety specific. But in terms of color, we talked about the fact that from deep ruby purple, the wine will go to more garnet brick color. In terms of aromas, from the fresh fruit, we'll move towards more like spiciness and cedar and truffle forest floor. That's usually the evolution. In terms of the next step, so again, what I mentioned is that this presentation was built from a report that was created based on the analysis of 71 publications. This report is available for purchase, and I will link that into my communication after the presentation. But again, it's very comprehensive. So if only you are studying, for one exam and you are very curious, I think it would be a good addition to your training.